Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Andrew Kirchhoff, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're talking about my tight end strength of schedule for the 2021 fantasy football season. On today's episode, of course, we're talking about all things related to matchups at the tight end position. But the real reason that I wanted to go ahead and talk about tight ends was to give us the potential of alternative options. The current meta of the tight end position is picking guys within the top 5 of the position and hoping they can deliver strong performances. And the reason that that's currently become the meta is because, of course, we have 3 strong options in Kelsey, Waller, and Kittle. And last year, in terms of the entire fantasy landscape at the tight end position, it was very bleak. We saw very little upside for many of these players. A lot of them didn't even score more than 10 fantasy points per week on average. In fact, we only saw 3 tight ends surpass 150 fantasy points in a half PPR scoring format last season. We saw just as many team defenses and twice as many kickers produce more than 150 fantasy points last year. So just putting into perspective as to how much inconsistency we've seen at this position, I'm sure we've all been burnt from the tight end position over the last couple of years. But the reason why I wanted to, of course, talk about the tight ends and specifically their matchups going into 2021 is because maybe you don't have to invest early in a tight end. You know, I've been very vocal this offseason in the fact that I want to select an upper tier tight end, whether that is one of the top 6. Now, for those of you who are going to wait or potentially don't have the opportunity to select one of these great options, you can go ahead and wait on an option and go after a guy that has an incredibly advantageous schedule, like a Noah Fant, like a Mike Gesicki, Logan Thomas, Dallas Goedert, Evan Ingram. A lot of people don't talk about some of these tight ends, and they're not given as much exposure because of the fact that, again, they're not going to be scoring in that 200-point range. They're not going to be putting up those incredible back-to-back 20-point weeks that you see other tight ends produce because they're given far more opportunity in their respective offenses. So what I'll be covering today is, of course, the matchups of the tight end position, which tight ends have the most advantageous schedules going into the 2021 season. Because, again, if we're already borderline on a tight end and he's a guy that's within the top 15 rankings, but we're not 100% sold on him, why go after him when he doesn't have that much of an advantageous schedule, when you can go after guys that are in the top 10, have great schedules, playing against defenses that have shown a history of being bad against the tight end position because they either don't have great coverage linebackers and safeties that can go ahead and bottle up tight ends, giving us more of an opportunity for success. Now, before we begin today's video and start talking about the strength of schedule, the defined strength of schedule for the 2021 season at the tight end position, weeks 1 through 7, 8 through 14, in the fantasy football playoffs to get us prepared for the 2021 season. If you're trying to stay up to date and get an edge on your league, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We are very close to surpassing 37,000 subscribers. I cannot thank you guys enough for the incredible support this offseason. Of course, our goal doesn't stop there at 37. We're looking to get far beyond that this upcoming season. So join the community because we're making fantasy football content every single day on this channel, trying to help you win a 2021 fantasy football championship. Thank you very much in advance. Beyond that, I, of course, want to go ahead and thank all of you who have already supported via the Patreon and signed up recently. And for those of you who have already picked up Andrew Kirchhoff's 2021 Fantasy Football Draft Guide. For those of you who have a draft this upcoming weekend, think about it. The links are down in the description for those of you guys that are interested, either Patreon or the website, to acquire Andrew Kirchhoff's 2021 Fantasy Football Draft Guide. It will give you an edge on your league. We'll have up-to-date rankings. All of the expansive information can be found below in the links to give you more of an understanding as to what you can acquire within Andrew Kirchhoff's 2021 Fantasy Football Draft Guide. Thank you very much in advance. All right, so let's talk about the tight end position because I think the tight end position, again, in comparison to all other positions in fantasy football, we find that the tight end position just doesn't have depth. I mean, sure, we've always talked about you have to grab a running back twice within the first 3 rounds because after the first 8 rounds of a draft, the running back position is completely gone. I understand that, but when we talk about the tight end position, after the first 2 rounds, the tight end position is theoretically gone, right? Because after the top 3 are off the board, and even then, George Kittle has had some injury issues over the last couple of years. There isn't really that much solidified value at the position and a consistent amount of it because we've seen turnover year over year with players like Zach Ertz disappeared in one season. Can you imagine that? A guy that was such a consistent part of that position and one of the top 3 year over year has just up and gone. With that being said, the amount of lack of depth at this position and how many more, quarterbacks you don't have to worry about, wide receivers that you can grab in the double-digit rounds and still find incredible success, 10-plus point guys every single week in the 12th round somehow, some way, especially in a half or full PPR scoring format. But I want to talk about, of course, what we can anticipate from defenses, and what tight ends benefit the most this upcoming season based on their schedules. So last season, as you can see to the immediate right of me, the teams that were giving up the most fantasy points per game in 2020 in a half PPR scoring format on average on a weekly basis were the New York Jets, Chicago Bears, Cleveland Browns, Atlanta Falcons, and Jacksonville Jaguars. Should be no surprise considering all of those defenses were relatively underwhelming last year. I know the Chicago Bears were a surprise there, but their coverage linebackers and safeties just weren't great last year overall. Of course, they were giving up 12.95 fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends on a weekly basis. But from top to bottom, we go down from the New York Jets all the way to the San Francisco 49ers, who were giving up the least amount of fantasy points to opposing tight ends on a weekly basis. Just kind of giving you an understanding as to how 2020 kind of panned out through the entire season. If we were to apply the strength of schedule from the 2020 season into our 2021 schedules, of course, only weeks 1 through 17 and the 16 games us fantasy managers will be participating in, we would have found that the New England Patriots, Pittsburgh Steelers, Miami Dolphins, Denver Broncos, and New York Giants would have had the easiest overall schedules. But like I've mentioned in the last couple of days, as we've talked about running backs, wide receivers, and quarterbacks, we can't take this at face value. Yes, the 2020 season does give us a lot of insight as to what could potentially happen in 2021 because a lot of the defenses are majority intact. Like, yes, there are going to be free agents and there are going to be rookies that join teams and make impact, but mainly these defenses are intact and look very similar to the year prior. But with that being said, we're going to refer back to these statistics as I wanted to go ahead and apply those rookies and free agents to their respective defenses to get an understanding as to which defenses are the worst in terms of coverage at the tight end position. As we transition to our next page, we'll see the statistic on the top, 2021 team defense. I went ahead and I found the graded coverage averages of all coverage linebackers, safeties, and if in fact teams used cornerbacks to guard tight ends last season, and found that the Minnesota Vikings, San Francisco 49ers, Denver Broncos, Cincinnati Bengals, and yes, the New York Jets of all teams had the highest graded averages in terms of coverage at the linebacker and, of course, safety positions in order to potentially stop opposing tight ends. Now, you may be wondering, how did the Jets get into this top tier when they were giving up 15 fantasy points per game last season on average to opposing tight ends in a half PPR scoring format? Well, it's pretty easy. You bring back CJ Mosley, who's coming back from an injury. You still have Gerard Davis, who's one of the better linebackers that cover in this National Football League. Marcus May was incredible at the safety position in terms of his overall coverage. Those averages definitely went up. You bring in Robert Saleh on top of the fact that last year, the San Francisco 49ers, they were not allowing any sort of opportunity or exposure to opposing tight ends. That is going to definitely shift the tides for the New York Jets and potentially give them some upside this year. But, just taking that into account, these are the teams that had the highest overall grades on average for covering tight ends. Now, on the opposite end of the spectrum, we, of course, had the Houston Texans, Baltimore Ravens, Las Vegas Raiders, Detroit Lions, and Los Angeles Chargers. Now, you may be wondering, how are the Baltimore Ravens down there? I'll tell you. Patrick Queen, the rookie middle linebacker from LSU last year, was horrible in coverage. He had a very low score, and it was quite surprising and jarring, to be honest. But that's what happens when you're a rookie. Maybe he's going to go ahead and improve this year, and we'll potentially see him take steps towards that. But overall, in terms of his coverage ability, the safeties on that team weren't that good last year in overall coverage. Now, if we go ahead and we take these statistics and isolate them and insert them for the 2021 schedule, the, of course, 16 games that we're going to be participating in as fantasy managers, we'll find that the Denver Broncos, Miami Dolphins, Philadelphia Eagles, Buffalo Bills, New York Giants are at the top in terms of the most advantageous schedules this upcoming season. Now, a lot of those teams have a reoccurring presence in comparison to the strength of schedule we showed on the prior page. Now, if we go ahead and we take both factors into account, the potential defenses for the 2021 season, and of course the performances of said defenses from 2020, we go ahead and throw that into a spreadsheet, find the potential values that give us the best indication of the 2021 strength of schedule. As doing so, we would find that the 2021 tight end strength of schedule would end up as such. The Miami Dolphins, New England Patriots, Denver Broncos, New York Giants, and Washington Football Team being among the top 5 in terms of the most advantageous schedule and the easiest strength of schedule at the tight end position this season. Now, just looking at that right away, Mike Gesicki, Jonnu Smith, Noah Fant, Evan Ingram, Logan Thomas, then we get Dallas Goedert, 7 Pittsburgh. You still have Eric Ebron, but Pat Freiermuth looked good in that preseason game, caught 2 receiving touchdowns from Big Ben in the red zone. We could see some progress there. Of course, Tampa Bay has Gronk. We have Atlanta with Hayden Hurst and Kyle Pitts, of course. We follow with the New York Jets, who Tyler Kroft has looked good, caught 2 receiving touchdowns from Zach Wilson in that preseason game again. Of course, I mean, the Buffalo Bills don't really use tight end unless they're going to go trade for Zach Ertz in the coming weeks. I'm not really looking at Dawson Knox as too much of an option. And then you get Travis Kelce, who already was a stud last season. I mean, I think he was a top 10 tight end every single week, except for week 7 against the Denver Broncos. He finishes the number 1 overall tight end, 5 separate weeks. Unstoppable year last year. Regardless, he gets a really easy schedule on top of it. But when we look at this and we see the fact that a lot of the tight ends that aren't in this top 6 conversation are guys that have the most advantageous schedules going into the 2021 season, it gives me far more confidence to potentially even go and invest in them. I don't mind the exposure of opportunity that Logan Thomas, Mike Gesicki, and Noah Fant all have this upcoming season. They all play in offenses that like to target the tight end position. If we go to Denver and we look at Pat Shurmur, the current offensive coordinator of the Denver Broncos, formerly the offensive coordinator of the New York Giants, of course, helped Evan Ingram get on the map. Since his departure, Evan Ingram's kind of been underwhelming, to say the least. Noah Fant has an opportunity to take another step forward this year. Of course, was dealing with injuries last year. You have Mike Gesicki. Of course, he plays for Miami. They changed their offensive coordinator. They have it's interesting. It's the first time I've ever seen co-offensive coordinators in all my time. I mean, honestly, maybe I'm just forgetting other guys, but one of their offensive coordinators was the running backs coach for the Miami Dolphins last year. The other was a tight ends coach. Of course, Mike Gesicki is going to see a lot of action this year. And then we have the Washington football team. Of course, their offensive coordinator used to be the offensive coordinator for the Carolina Panthers. Greg Olsen, back in the day, of course, was getting a lot of targets for a reason. So if we just go ahead and take that into account, there's a lot of guys going into this upcoming year that are being undervalued, that have very advantageous schedules. Now, of course, what am I talking about in terms of their upcoming schedule? We'll go over, of course, weeks 1 through 7, 8 through 14, and the fantasy football playoffs to give us a little bit more perspective on the matter. But I do want to go ahead and look on the bottom of this list. There are teams like the Seattle Seahawks, Detroit Lions, Chicago Bears, Los Angeles Rams, Arizona Cardinals, Jacksonville Jaguars that are going to have a tough time at the tight end position. But the one that, in my opinion, sticks out the most is TJ Hawkinson and the Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions have one of the most difficult schedules amongst all positions across the board. If the Detroit Lions go 0-17 this year, I wouldn't be surprised. I know that they're not that bad. They're professionals and they're going to get their jobs done. But it is going to be very difficult for them to win games this year just based on the schedule that they play up against. Now, their offense is going to struggle. Their defense is definitely not built for it. But luckily for the Detroit Lions and TJ Hawkinson, they're going to be in negative game scripts the entire year. And where does that leave, Jared Goff? That leaves him dropping back every single down and looking short because the offensive line is potentially going to fall apart. And he's going to have to find a little dump off every single week. He's not going to be able to wait for Rashad Perriman or Tyrell Williams to get down the field. He will be looking in the direction of TJ Hawkinson, I can assure you that. So I'm not really too worried there. I'm just, as of right now, when I look at the strength of schedule of the 2021 season, I'm looking for alternative options. I'm not concerned about the top 6 because I know their opportunity and their exposure down in the red zone is already engraved into them, and that's not going to change this year unless an injury is to occur, God forbid. So we're just going to look for multiple options, specifically the guys at the top of this list that I mentioned already. Now that we've covered that, I want to go ahead and talk about specific stretches of time, beginning with weeks 1 through 7 of the 2021 fantasy football season. As we can see, the strength of schedule from the first 7 games, or for specifically 10 teams, the first 6 games, because again, there are 10 teams between weeks 6 and 7 that have a bye week, we find that the Washington football team, Miami Dolphins, Denver Broncos, the 3 teams that I've been talking about, of course, Logan Thomas, Mike Gesicki, and Noah Fant have the easiest strength of schedules. As you can see up and down their board, they don't have very difficult schedules in comparison to a lot of these other teams. You don't have to face San Francisco and Minnesota and the coverage linebackers that are certainly going to be a problem for your respective tight ends. So if these 3 potential tight end options, or either the options that are remaining in this top 12, like the Dallas Cowboys, if that's Blake Jarwin and he's going to get all of the reps at the tight end position, that's great. Mark Andrews, of course. Travis Kelce's going to be succeeding, of course, at the number 6 spot. Jared Cook from the Los Angeles Chargers. I think Jared Cook coming in and filling the role of Hunter Henry is going to be seamless. He's another big body target, 6'8" down the field, down in the red zone, could be a huge threat with Justin Herbert. We, of course, have the Philadelphia Eagles, who, regardless of who's playing at the tight end position, there's 2 viable options on that team. And the likelihood of both Dallas Goedert and Zach Ertz even leading their respective team in targets this year is is a potential option. That being said, the fact that we have 3 of these teams that are at the top and could potentially start off on a very good foot makes me believe that investing in them is not a bad option at all. I can go ahead and get extra value at running back, quarterback, wide receiver, land with one of these 3 options, and be in a very advantageous position to begin the season and going forward. Now, of course, there are going to be teams, like I've mentioned, that have tough strengths of schedule. San Francisco 49ers sitting at the very bottom. They play against Detroit, Philly, Green Bay, Seattle, Arizona. They have a bye week, then Indianapolis. The Detroit matchup is going to be fun. Outside of that, Philly's okay, and then the rest are pretty difficult. They've got good personnel in terms of covering the tight end position. But am I worried for George Kittle? Not a bit, because the guy's going to see 10 targets a game. He's going to get all the work. He's going to get all of the opportunity. And with opportunity comes success in fantasy football. I'm not worried about the upper echelon tight ends. I'm looking towards guys that a lot of people are passing up on and why I potentially will be going after them this season. So taking this into account, I, of course, want to continue on, and let's start talking about weeks 8 through 14. The Miami Dolphins maintain at top of the list. They have an unbelievably advantageous schedule this upcoming season. And I know there's going to be teams, and at times there are going to be opportunities in which Mike Gesicki isn't scoring every touchdown there. They have a lot of guys in their rotation. I'm aware of this. But the way that he has excelled from year to year, 2019 to 2020 in terms of his total opportunity, his effectiveness per opportunity, all the stats going in his direction, the fact that he plays in the slot majority of the time, he is far and away a receiver rather than a blocking tight end. In terms of the small sample size we've had with Tua, he has shown that he, of course, wants to go ahead and feed the ball to his tight end. He did it last year. We had a couple good games there with Mike Gesicki until he got injured. So just taking that into account. Of course, we have Evan Ingram with the New York Giants. Hopefully can have a bounce back year this year. We have Johnny Smith and or Hunter Henry of the New England Patriots. The Indianapolis Colts, Mo Alley Cox is not a bad option. There's still Jack Doyle there, but I'm not too convinced with the Indianapolis Colts. We got to go ahead and see if they're going to mainstream a single tight end option, because they haven't done that in the last couple of years. Since, of course, I think Eric Ebron in 2018, that was the last time we saw a great tight end option from that team, and that was mainly because Andrew Luck was really feeding him. I think he had 13 touchdowns that year. Speaking of Eric Ebron, we talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's got another tight end breathing down his neck, the rookie that they drafted, so that's going to be an issue. But again, the teams that I mentioned way before this in terms of the overall strength of schedule reappear here. We still have Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, Denver, Atlanta. We've got so many great options going forward in the second half of the season. Gives me that much more confidence in investing in these players. Now I want to go ahead and I want to move on to our final leg of the season. The span of time where champions are crowned. The fantasy football playoffs, weeks 15, 16, and 17 of this season. Again, don't forget, do not play in a week 18 championship. Make sure that your commissioner has changed that. And if you're the commissioner, change that this upcoming season. You don't want to be playing in week 18. Looking at the strength of schedule, we have a bit of a different configuration at the top. The Seattle Seahawks have made their way to the top. If Gerald Everett, by the time we get to week 15, 16, and 17, has kind of caught fire, is getting himself some opportunity, or at least shown the ability to score on a weekly basis, the matchups are going to be in his favor. The Carolina Panthers, maybe Dan Arnold. We've seen Dan Arnold in the last, 2-3 years. In the last couple games of the year, he always comes out and pops off, and then gives us the confidence, maybe we want to, go after him as a sleeper the following year, and then he disappears. In terms of the total opportunity of targets that the tight end position saw for the Carolina Panthers last year, I'm not too confident in his potential, but an option nonetheless once we get down the line, if in fact the strength of schedule is looking similar to this, based on all the injuries and all the other effective variables that are going to be able to take in place. Of course, the Denver Broncos, New York Jets, the New Orleans Saints, maybe Adam Trotman, San Francisco 49ers, that's a lock already. The Chargers, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Patriots. We've got very good options down the line from weeks 15, 16, and 17. But I wanted to just go ahead and show you this to give you an understanding as to what alternative options I like going into the 2021 season that are going to give me more confidence in drafting based on the strength of schedule. I think in comparison to the other positions we've talked about this week, sure, it gives us more confidence, but the strength of schedule has never been the determining factor as to whether I draft a player at the running back position. If I like a running back based on their total exposure to opportunity and their red zone looks and the amount of work they get through the air, their talent, all of that in conjunction with the team that they play on. Like, if all of that locks into place, then I'll go for them. But the strength of schedule has never been the determining factor. But when I look at the tight end position and look at how bad it's been over the last couple of years, and I didn't get one of the consensus top 6 overall tight ends, an alternative option here with Gesicki, Fant, Logan Thomas, Evan Ingram, Dallas Goedert. These are not bad options, guys. They have very advantageous schedules, and they could very easily be the difference maker between you winning and losing a championship, because their presence could mean the presence of another upper tier wide receiver 2 or an upper tier RB2, RB3 that you were able to select earlier in the draft, or a quarterback you were able to grab earlier that ends up being the MVP this season. So again, being able to wait on tight end, though it is very sketchy and it has hurt many of us in the last couple of years, I think these options are very viable going into 2021. I want to thank you guys for taking your time out of your day to watch today's video. Hopefully you liked it. If you did, go down below, smash that like button. Again, you guys are continuing to support the channel. Make sure you subscribe. Again, we're almost at 37,000 subscribers. Really do appreciate your guys' support. Make sure to check out Andrew Kirchhoff's 2021 Fantasy Football Draft Guide down in the description of the video for those of you who are interested. Outside of that, tomorrow, we're going to have very exciting content. The tier list video comes back out. It is the running back tier list tomorrow. It's going to be exciting. And until then, guys, I'll see you. Peace.